Don't call it a comeback and don't call it a concession speech. That was Bernie Sanders going strong there in California just within the last hour. I want to turn back to our panel here, live election night coverage. Beth Fooey, Maria, Teresa, Kumar, and Liz Plank. And you look at that and you see a Bernie Sanders who obviously isn't going anywhere. But there is something going on beneath the surface. The New York Times reporting here tonight that he is planning to lay off a large portion of his campaign staff. They are arguing the campaign that is logical because they don't have as many events and there's advanced staff and there's all sorts of people that just aren't going to be necessary even if he's not giving up. And yet it shows some of the fissures here that he can say he's going to Philly. He could say it's not over, but it doesn't feel the same. Right. And what we're seeing also coming out of Politico tonight is an article really showing that his campaign has been very dysfunctional, too. And so, but I don't think Bernie Sanders cares about any of this. I mean, Bernie Sanders, that's sort of been like his brand throughout this whole process. I mean, the way that I was watching the way he announced when he announced he was going to run for president for some reason on YouTube, and it was just really impressive to see. You don't watch TV, you just watch it on YouTube? I watched it on YouTube, yeah. I'm sorry. I know. Okay. Cord cutter, millennial. There you go. Guilty as charged. But I just found it interesting. He's like, okay, I'm just going to do this because we don't have a lot of time. I got to go back in there. And his hair is all over the place. Like, he never really cared. And so I don't think at this point he cares either. And that's why he's staying in the race. And yet, Beth, listen to Hillary Clinton. We were talking earlier before the break about how he didn't mention her much. Here's what she had to say tonight about him.
I want to congratulate Senator Sanders for the extraordinary campaign he has run. He has spent his long career in public service fighting for progressive causes and principles, and he's excited millions of voters, especially young people. And let there be no mistake, Senator Sanders, his campaign, and the vigorous debate that we've had about how to raise incomes, reduce inequality, increase upward mobility have been very good for the Democratic Party and for America.
That was a pretty classy gesture. She didn't have to say that, and she did. She devoted a good chunk of her speech, this historic speech where she became the first woman ever nominated, to her opponent who was trying to stand in the way of that historic nomination. Let there be no question about that he is doing that. He is basically denying her the opportunity to free and clear be that nominee by saying that he's going to go ahead and fight it to next Tuesday in the District of Columbia and then on to Philly, and he barely even acknowledged her, and he sort of suggested that she'd called him. He's sort of, one could argue that he's sort of a man standing in a woman's way of something that she's actually earned.
Is one arguing that?
I would say a lot of correct. I'd say a lot of women are arguing that tonight, Ari.
Well, the thing is that for a long time the Democrats didn't want a coronation of Clinton, and he made her fight for it, and not only was she able to fight for it, but she was able to demonstrate that she won fair and square. Now, again, she's the presumptive nominee, but I think what she was able to do there, too, is that she said, look, Bernie and your supporters, I've heard your agenda. I hear that you want a more progressive America, and I'm willing to actually open the door so that we can have those conversations, and I'm bringing you into the fold. She did the exact same thing today when she was talking about Trump and his supporters. She went after Trump, but basically said, look, I understand, Trump supporter, why you're right now angry with America. Let's have this conversation because I'll be a president for all of us.
I wonder, though, whether some of this is personalizing what is not personal. And you mentioned that obviously there is some enmity between the two of them. I don't think anyone needs to pretend otherwise. Yeah. And yet, when you talk about what's good for the Democratic Party or the timeline or the convention, these are not things that Bernie Sanders has spent his political career caring about, right? He caucuses with the Democrats. He doesn't say up until this cycle when he was running that he is a Democrat. And so the idea that you put the party first or there's a time to go out and say, okay, this is over, that's not who he is, right? And this is a cycle where being independent has been seen as a boon on both sides.
Right. But I think the danger that if Bernie continues down this road is that it actually takes resources from the Hillary Clinton camp to actually start focusing on the person on the other side who's increasingly being able to actually define what the election looks like. It doesn't only take up resources, but it actually doesn't allow her to actually craft what that Democratic agenda is, and it wastes time. 3 weeks in a political life cycle is a life cycle in politics. So it's all about, unfortunately, that she's right now coming from behind because she has to continue focusing her efforts on Bernie Sanders, whether they like it or not.
And I mean, the reason why he said that he was staying in the race, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, his biggest talking point, his campaign's talking point was, I'm the best person to take on Donald Trump. You don't want Donald Trump to be president. I am beating him in all of the polls. But all of what he's doing right now is helping Donald Trump. I mean, by staying in the race, by hitting Hillary. And I think that this enthusiasm gap, this lack of enthusiasm, not just with young people, but particularly young women, with the idea of having a first female president, I think is going to come when she has an opponent and she's running in the general. Right now, she's fighting two opponents in two different ways, and that is, I think, preventing even, I mean, so I was at the rally tonight.
You were there tonight in Brooklyn.
And look, I'm not for any particular candidate, but I had goosebumps. There were feelings in the room. There was a young girl who was in the media box next to me watching this woman give a speech, the first female nominee of a party to run for president. Like, that's amazing. And that is impressive. And now I'm no longer thinking about that because of Bernie Sanders. It's like, okay, we got to go back and think of it. So it changes the dynamic, and I think we're going to see a very different dynamic once he does step down.
Right,
but it's getting an awful lot of attention. I mean, just think about it. What history was made tonight by Hillary Clinton, and we're spending 90% of our time sitting here talking about Bernie Sanders.
And I think
he's getting a lot of attention. Right. He's getting the attention of the President of the United States on Thursday. He's got a private meeting with him. The President called him over the weekend. It's not like people are trying to say, you don't matter anymore, Bernie. People are taking very good care of him and making sure that he's feeling respected. He doesn't seem to feel that he's being respected, but he's certainly getting a lot of respect.
And I mean, that's definitely the sense that you got from that Political article, where the staffers basically are doing this mini uprising and throwing him under the bus, saying that all the decisions that they made that were wrong was because he was micromanaging and wasn't allowing the campaign to flourish. But I do think that Bernie Sanders is actually missing the bigger picture. One of the reasons he said in the beginning of his speech tonight was that he was trying to craft a progressive agenda, and that's what he was going to bring to the party. That's terrific, but is it really doing it at the convention floor? There are other ways to negotiate it where people will understand why Hillary is actually going to be much more progressive.
Not only that, you can argue that being magnanimous would go further, that if you say, hey, I'm about the platform now, I'm about a few highlights, and not challenging her, people would even be more receptive to it. Beth Fouy, I know you're getting up early tomorrow for our coverage, so thanks for being here tonight. Appreciate it.